Welcome to Real Talk. I'm Kathy Dawson from Homefield Group at Royal LePage. Today I have with me my teammate, Rick Lobb, and we have a guest with us today, an interior designer, Sarah Langtry. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
So, where are you from, Sarah, and what attracted you to Goderich?
I grew up in London area, actually, and we moved to the States for my husband's job for about 9 years, and then we actually came back to Goderich 9 years later. So that's kind of what brought us to the Goderich area, but we always knew that we wanted to be back in Southern Ontario. But Goderich is a beautiful town, and we love the small town feeling and a little bit of a slower down. And living next to the lake is just, you can't beat it.
So you're an interior designer.
Yes.
And I am curious. Well, having built a house, before building a house, I never knew what an interior designer sort of brought to the table, and I kind of thought them synonymous with interior decorators. But if you could just touch on the difference between like why somebody would hire an interior designer and sort of what the designer brings to the table versus using an interior decorator and sort of the difference between the two.
Sure. Yeah. An interior designer actually has a little bit more training than a decorator does. It's almost the study of function and how it relates to space. So we learn a lot more architectural details as well. So we are able to, as an interior designer, we're actually able to make floor plans and kitchen drawings, and we actually have studied how space and human function relates to your design. So, for instance, we know exactly, how wide a hallway should be or how much space that you need between your island and your cooktop to, be functional.
And when you're looking at design, so if somebody is hiring you to consult on the layout of a kitchen or the layout of let's say an entire house, because you said you could do the drawings for an entire house?
I can. They still need an architect approval, but we have the ability and the training to be able to do that.
And so when you're meeting with somebody then who's going to, let's say they've got a base layout of a house and then they want your input on it, you're going to sort of factor in like taste, like design taste, or actual layout function need?
Both, actually. So,
okay.
Yeah, so both. So we look at, taste, we look at, what they prefer to have in a kitchen, for instance, if they like, white cabinetry, wood cabinetry, what type of countertops. We also are a little bit more knowledgeable as to the materials that you use and why you should use them. But we also, have a formula that we work with when designing a kitchen to know how it would best function for you and the way that you would use your kitchen.
And as far as trends, stuff that is sort of coming down the pipe, I mean, and again, looking at houses over the years, you sort of recognize certain elements. For example, I always think of that orangey oak kitchen is reminiscent of the mid 90s and the early 2000s. Those kinds of trends, like, is it sort of interior designers that end up sort of setting those trends or bringing in new concepts and ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of, when you think of like the fashion industry, for instance, you start to see things that come out, in the big shows in Milan and New York. And at first you look at them and think like, wow, that's pretty wild. But then you start seeing it trickle down eventually over the next couple of years into, the mainstream stores and people's homes. So it's kind of the way that it's set. Interior design, usually you start seeing some trends in shows or magazines that haven't quite hit the mainstream yet. And then it sort of trickles down over the next couple of years.
So you're likely seeing some new trends for 2021 at this point.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite products or favorite trends, colors, products that you're seeing?
Yeah, there's, actually oak is having a bit of a comeback. It's white oak, though. It's not the orangey red oak that's, reminiscent of the 90s. It's a little bit more of a cleaner, brighter, lighter wood tone. And then whites neutrals are still really big, but they're starting to get a little bit more earthy feeling. So you'll start to see white cabinetry actually be replaced with more of like a mushroom or putty type tone. So a little bit warmer, not as much gray, a little bit more of the brown warm tones coming back.
Well, what about paint colors?
Paint color is the same. Like, it's still pretty neutral. So, still a lot of whites, but the whites are turning away from more of the grays to more of those warmer, earthy tones. So a lot of texture. Greens are really coming back too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So with regard to your business, are you into residential design, or do you do commercial or any industrial design as well?
Not really. I do mostly residential. It's
Okay.
99% residential.
And how have you found, because you're relatively new to Godrich, and of course, while, there hasn't been a whole ton of opportunity for new construction in this whole area because there just hasn't been that many subdivisions happening. Do you deal a lot in renovations currently, or where's the bulk of your sort of business coming through?
Yeah, mostly renovations. So I do a lot of kitchen and bath renovations, some additions, but mostly I'd say about 75% right now is renovations and kitchens.
Okay.
And do you have any other trades that you're connected with that might specialize in certain areas? And what unique services might they offer?
Yeah, I do work with quite a few trades. I have a couple of cabinet makers that I work with that are local, and I like to try and keep everything as local as possible, just to promote local business. So I work with some local custom cabinet makers, and then I also have a few contractors that I work with as well.
And then I have seen the inside of your house.
Yes.
So I do know that you're extremely talented at what you do. I'm assuming you did the layout and everything for your own house.
Yes, I did.
What's sort of your, well, I guess you said kitchens and bathrooms are sort of your specialty. But if somebody is building a brand new house that's going to be a custom house, will you go through the whole, like, do the drawings and is that something that you are that you're sort of interested in, or do you prefer taking sections of a house and then retrofitting a new design in an older space?
I can do either, really. So, for instance, for my house, I designed it based on a blueprint. So, for instance, I went through and looked at a few different layouts and blueprints, and I saw something that I like, and then I changed it and modified it to fit how our family lives. So, and that's really important too, because, someone who's retired will live different and have different needs and different functions that they need to satisfy compared to, say, a young family with lots of kids. You might need a better functioning mud room or laundry room for all those, winter boots, or you may need a special, play space or area and storage for kids, that someone who's retired necessarily wouldn't need. So yeah, usually a lot of the times I'll take a plan and then just modify it and retrofit it to better suit the person who's building the house.
I know in my own experience, my wife and I learned the value of having a design consultant when you're building. And I know when we did our plans, between my wife and I, we had a pretty good sort of idea of how the property or the house should be laid out. But we consulted with a lady who was in design at the time, and she made some suggestions to us as we were nearing the completion of the plans that had we not taken her suggestions, we would have had massive regrets in our final build. And so I definitely learned the value of working with a design consultant when you're laying out a house or when you're looking at room sizes and where the placement of things should be.
Yeah.
So whereas before that build, if somebody asked me, like the value of working with an interior designer, I would have had no idea how important it was to consult somebody.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest regrets that I have from clients or people who come to me after the fact. So say after they've built a house, they always say, I wish I made this room bigger, or I did this different, or, I did this and this different. And then to go back and fix that down the road, you're talking about, thousands and thousands of dollars to move walls or, change flooring. So the value that I would bring to the table is just that, I make sure that you're choosing the right materials that work for your family, that the space is going to function for you properly. And, we also think about things that, not everybody necessarily thinks that they would need, in a new home. So,
Sarah, one more question for you. Yeah. With the pandemic, a lot of people have been changing their business up a little bit to do as much online as they can. You recently did a consultation for me, and although you do have to come into the home to take measurements and things, I was quite impressed with your online consultation and your walkthrough when you sent me the video link. Can you just explain that a little bit and tell people about that?
Sure. Yeah. I try to do, obviously in person is best. So sometimes when it's one-on-one, it's very easy, right now to maintain that physical distance necessary. But I also do virtual consultations. So if someone is more comfortable with, me doing something online, we can do that via FaceTime or Zoom. But then after the fact, I actually have a great software that I use that creates a 3D visual. So for instance, for kitchen drawings, you don't just have the 2D drawings, it actually pops it up in 3D. And then I record on my screen sort of a little walkthrough so you can get an idea of what your space would look like when it's done, right through the computer, right in a 3D software. So that's been really helpful because I find that people like to visualize what it's going to look like when it's done, because it's really difficult to do that sometimes from just a 2D paper drawing.
That was quite impressive, and it felt like you were right there when I could hear your voice explaining certain things. Yeah, I was impressed by that.
Yeah,
thank you for joining us today. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we maybe didn't touch on?
No, I don't think so. I think if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can always check out my website. It is interiorsbysaralangtree.com, and there's tons of information, photos, portfolios on there, and lots of information about the different services that I offer.
Well, on a final parting note, I can say that if you're considering building a house or designing a floor plan in the future, consulting Sarah or somebody who can give you some a third-party opinion on your plan and on your sort of what you're trying to achieve in your build, it's absolutely crucial to do that, because once you build your house, you can't undo it.
Yes.
And so, yeah, the value of an interior designer such as yourself is really brought to the forefront when you actually are walking through your finished product and realizing, like, oh my God, imagine if we didn't consult that person. And I would have never have known the value of an interior designer until I built a house. And we were lucky to have had somebody to consult with at that time. And now, because I know that there's not that many interior designers in this area, and the fact that you're here is of huge value to anybody who's looking to build a house around here.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to get in touch with Sarah if you're doing a build anytime in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for joining.
Good. Thanks for having me again today.